Report. My name is Kimberly Johnsonson. Complementing our regular coverage of global issues, for this report we will focus on access to healthcare. While the world's eyes are once again turned to Korea, this is not the first disaster to confront the international health community. Despite years of being in the international spotlight, the health situation in South Sudan shows no signs of improving. According to the most recent World Health Organization report, less than 50% of South Sudanese have access to health care. The young nation, according to health officials, only has 1.5 medical doctors and 2 nurses for every 100,000 patients, which is far below the WHO's recommended standard of 250 health workers per 100,000 people. We welcome to the SABC studio Clara Dickens, a logistics coordinator at Oxfam International.
The global community honestly doesn't have the greatest track record in dealing with these types of extreme circumstances. Despite leaps in the portability of technology and improvements in medicine, countries that suffer from wars and major disasters have not been able to cope over time.
Is healthcare dependent on building roads?
In a lot of ways, it is. The work of health NGOs is entirely dependent on the infrastructure in a country. In a place like Sudan, some of that infrastructure is being built by NGOs. This is far from an ideal situation, however, as a government should be the one building infrastructure. At this point, NGOs are engaged in country building and are not fulfilling specialized functions, which is what the NGOs are best at.
There are more than 150 NGOs operating in southern Sudan, backed by the international community and the UN, and yet health outcomes show no signs of improving.
A lot of that is because the conditions that NGOs are dealing with are the result of an incredibly complex web of factors. When women need to get permission to go to the doctor and cities are isolated by seasonal rains for months, you can imagine that the situation is quite extreme. While capacity building is within the mandate of many NGOs, ultimately the capacities we are trying to build are those that empower the citizens of the country and their leaders to be able to overcome their struggles themselves.
Thank you for clarifying all of that, Clara. For our next story, SABC brings you a report on a significant issue facing many developing nations: brain drain. With the lack of academic institutions that provide a comprehensive training for doctors, it has been a problem on the continent for years that the smartest and most driven youth would be forced to look to Europe and America to obtain the skills that would allow them to help their communities back home. Of course, in their youth, many of these overseas students decide to stay, and so African countries are robbed of a huge potential. A recent report by the WHO has caused alarm among the political class in South Africa, as it has become clear that Europe, which has an aging population in dire need of increased care, is facing an equally significant lack of new doctors. As has been the case for several decades, what Europe is unable to create on its own will often be taken from other places. An official at the South African Ministry of Health declined to comment for this story. That is all the time we have for a special health update. We will be at the MonWHO conference providing round-the-clock coverage of this most prestigious of events. Remember to follow us on Twitter at MonWHO Media. Thank you for watching. I'm Kimberly Johnsonson. And remember, ACON does not represent Africa.